morning. Today is a video about, well, basically something that's just described on eBay and other sites as a solar charge controller. Sometimes it is listed as an MC.PP.711 charge controller, sometimes as a PWM, sometimes as both. I'm gonna open it up real quick, and we'll show you that it's most definitely not an MPPT charge controller. It's probably PWM, and I'll hook it up and give you a quick overview of how it works and answer a question that I've had about this thing since I've got it. So okay, so as you can see, this thing does not have a very large toroid wrapped with wires, which is one of the things you have to have to be an MPPT charger. It's relatively, there's not much in here. I'm not going to go over the circuitry. I don't know anything about it, but I will show a couple of things here that I've noticed. Alright, number one is that right here and right here are spots for LEDs, and if you look in here, there's some openings that would correspond to a couple of LEDs, possibly three, but this one gets in the way of the LED. There's nothing on here that would light up, and so I think it's just for some kind of possible configuration that you can use this same case for. The other thing of note is right here, there's a spot for something, and possibly like a transistor and a couple of resistors or something like that. And what I think this is a photo detector that was supposed to be here. I'll explain why I think there was a photo detector in here in a little bit. So alright, so I'm going to stop the video and I'm going to put it back together, and then I'm going to hook it up and I'll come back in just a few minutes. Actually, before I put it completely back together, I'm going to show you. This is a 10 amp rated device. Actually, it says on here that it's LCD, 24 volts, 10 amps. Supposedly there are models of this that can handle 30 amps, and I'm really curious about those because the traces on here look like they would have no trouble handling the 10 amps. But I'm not sure about 30 amps, and it would be curious to see if what they did was they just piled up a bunch of solder on these to increase the amp rating. I believe that these are These components have been erased, or they are unmarked. So whatever these are, they have no markings on them. There's a couple controller chips under here, but I can't read them with the display in there. Anyways, I'll put it together and we'll be back in a minute or two. Okay, this is connected up to a battery and just a small little 12-volt light. I don't have it hooked up to a source, solar panel. I don't have one easily available, and it's not necessary for this demonstration. So when you plug it in and turn it on, it just turns on by itself here. Shows you the battery voltage. Currently it's not doing anything since I don't have a load on it and I don't have a solar panel. If it had a solar panel, it would have had a picture of a solar panel here and an arrow pointing to the battery indicating that it was trying to charge it. And if there's a load on, which I'll turn on the light, and you just press this button and you see that it's got an arrow pointing to the light, which is the load. And of course the load can be anything up to 10 amps. There's a bunch of menu items in here. You can see here what the display would look like if it was charging. The first menu item would be the float voltage. This is the voltage you would want to set to float the battery. Of course this thing times out. You would click here, and then if you hold it down it blinks and you can move these arrows up and down to set the float voltage, and then hold it down again. The next item is the discharge reconnect. And this is the voltage that once the battery is charged up to, that it'll start running the load. In this case I've got it set to 12.6 volts. Discharge stop is this one, and it defaults to it can go as low as like 9 volts or as high as 11.3. It would be nice if it would go higher than 11.3 volts. But this is how much it'll discharge the battery before it'll stop running the load. The next one is work mode, and this is a bone of contention I have for this device because it just says 24 hours. And if you look here on the instructions, it says load output 24 hours, load on after sunset, and dosed after setting hours, which is, it should, if you were to change the setting, it should be 1 to 23 hours. And then OH dusk to dawn. Now when you go into that setting, the only thing you can do is change the number of hours it runs. from 1 to 24 hours or 0. Basically, the way this works, at the moment you set the timer, so let's say you want this to run for 8 hours. You would set it for 8 hours, and the moment you do this, it's going to start running for 8 hours from that moment on, and then it's going to be off for the next 16. So you want to set this at the time you want it to run. So if you want it to start at 6 in the morning, you've got to get up at 6 in the morning and set this for the time you want it. It does not do any dusk to dawn sensing. Also, while it's in this mode, if you hold this button down, or is it this button? It resets it to 24 hours. And then the load will be on and off. Basically, it'll be on 24 hours, or unless you press this button. Also, one of the things is this thing automatically identifies the batteries. B01 is a 12-volt battery. For this thing to identify the battery properly, you have to hook it up to a charged battery. I think a battery has to be over 11 volts or something like that. It can identify 12 and 24 hour. Let's see here. It says here. It looks like it can somehow can determine the voltage. It'll choose B01, B02, or B03. So that's basically it. I have tested the USB chargers on here. They are 5 volts. We're very, very close to it. According to this, the maximum output is 2.5 amps. The device I tested it on only drew about an amp, and it did it just fine. So, for a basic solar charge controller, this works pretty well. It's really simple, not a lot of features. Definitely as an MPPT. In my previous video where I installed some ventilation fans in the shed, I've been running one of these in there. It's been working fine. The only thing that's happened is after about a year, the sealed, this was actually the battery that was out there, and after about a year of running pretty much day and night, the battery is at about half its capacity, and what was happening is it would stop running the fan because it would just run the voltage down too much. I've since replaced it with 2 of these in parallel, for 12 volts at, instead of, like in this case, they're 7 amp hours, it's two 12 volt 9 amp hour batteries in parallel for 18 amp hours. And then I adjusted the charging, I adjusted it so that it disconnects at 11.2 volts and it only runs for 16 hours a day and doesn't really run at night. So that's about it. Later.